2 years ago, my older brother, Jamie, vanished into thin air. It happened after a fight at our family home, just a slammed door and then silence that stretched for days, weeks, months. By now, the police file is closed, and everyone around us acts like he was never here. But every corner of our house still holds his shadow, even if none of us ever say his name. I still live with my mom in that same weathered blue house on the edge of Willow Street. Most mornings, she shuffles quietly through her routines, pouring coffee, staring out the kitchen window, lips pressed tight. We don't talk much over breakfast anymore. If a mug clinks too loud or the toast burns, she'll flinch, and I'll pretend not to notice. The living room is heavy with old air, the kind that smells faintly of lemon cleaner and something more bitter, maybe regret. Jamie's photos are gone from the shelves, boxed and hidden in the attic, but sometimes at night I hear her climbing the stairs, floorboards creaking, and I know she's up there, touching his things. Sometimes, I catch myself listening for the sound of his laugh echoing down the hallway, for the slam of the bathroom door in the mornings. Instead, there's just the hum of the fridge and the tick of the old clock above the stove. My life's become a kind of routine, too. Work, home, tiptoe around memories. Willow Street has moved on, but I haven't. I don't think Mom has, either, no matter how much she tries to act like everything's normal. This morning started like any other. Pale sunlight through dusty blinds, the smell of burnt coffee, the quiet scrape of a chair as I sat down. I was halfway through scrolling the news on my phone when I heard a thump outside, just light enough that I almost ignored it. But then it came again, a little heavier, like something solid hitting wood. I peered through the front door's frosted glass. The porch was streaked with last night's rain, and the air smelled sharp and clean. There it was, right on the welcome mat. A battered cardboard box, corners soggy, taped up with the kind of frantic care you use when you're in a hurry. My breath caught. The address was scrawled in black marker, each letter jagged and familiar. I crouched down, heart thudding, and ran my fingers over the writing. It was Jamie's. I'd know his handwriting anywhere, his way of looping the Y in our last name, the tilt of the J that always looked like it might tip over. The return address was smudged, unreadable. But that didn't matter. For a second, I just stared, cold rain seeping through my socks, while the world felt like it had tilted sideways. Mom, I called, voice cracking. She appeared in the hallway, wearing her old flannel robe and clutching a mug. Her eyes darted from me to the box, and I saw her shoulders tense. What is it? She asked, but I could already hear the edge in her voice, like she was bracing herself. I lifted the box with both hands. It was heavier than it looked, the bottom sagging a little from the damp. Something inside shifted, a dull thunk, like a book or maybe a brick. Look, I said, turning it so she could see. It's from Jamie, I think. She froze. The mug rattled against the saucer, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might drop it. Then she set it down, pressed her palm to her chest, and shook her head. That's not possible, she whispered. The air between us grew thick. I could hear the wind stirring the chimes outside, each note sharp as glass. It's his handwriting, I insisted, holding the box out like proof. Mom, look at it. She refused. You're mistaken. It's been too long. People move on, she stopped, swallowing hard. It's probably a prank. Some sick joke. I felt my chest tighten, anger and hope and fear all tangled up. Who would do that? Who even remembers enough to pull something like this? She shook her head, eyes shining in the morning light. Don't open it, she said, voice suddenly hard. We don't know what's inside. It could be anything. I stared at her. Don't you want to know? What if it's from him? What if it's a message? She turned away, shoulders hunched. Just leave it, please, for me. But I couldn't. My hands shook as I set the box down on the hallway table, every nerve buzzing. I wanted to tear it open, to finally have an answer after 2 years of silence. But at the same time, I was terrified. What if whatever was inside changed everything, again? We stood there, neither of us moving. The box sat between us, silent and heavy, the rain outside turning to a whisper against the porch roof. For a moment, it felt like all the air in the house was waiting too. I glanced at my mom, saw the fear etched into her face, and realized this package might shatter what little peace we'd managed to build. I pressed my palm to the top of the box, feeling the damp cardboard give under my fingers, and asked quietly, what if this is the only chance we have to know what happened to Jamie? She didn't answer. The silence stretched on, long enough that I started to wonder if I was the only one who wanted the truth. But I knew one thing. Whatever was in that box, it was going to change everything. I just didn't know if we were ready for it. My hands shook as I stood over the battered, rain-spattered package. The cardboard was soft along the corners, warped from its mysterious journey. My brother's handwriting stared up at me, unmistakable, looping, and pressed hard enough to dent the label. I ran my finger over his name, letting the rough surface prickle my skin, and felt a cold stab of hope and dread. I carried it inside, heart pounding, the air in the hallway thick and sour, like the house itself was holding its breath. At the kitchen table, I grabbed a steak knife and slid it under the taped seam. The blade rasped, the sound sharp and final. I hesitated. My mother's footsteps creaked overhead, and I thought for a second about calling her down, but something in me wanted to do this alone. I pressed the knife the rest of the way, splitting the tape with a gritty rip. Inside, layers of yellowed newspaper cradled the contents. I peeled them back, the ink flaking onto my fingertips, and pulled out a stack of old family photos. They were the kind you only see in plastic tubs in the attic, sun-faded, curling at the edges, some Polaroids, others from cheap disposable cameras. I recognized this instantly. Me, a gap-toothed kid in a space-themed sweater, my brother, grinning, lanky, arms slung around my shoulder, our parents, caught in rare moments of warmth. But tucked between the photos was a folded sheet of paper. It was thick, almost like parchment, and when I opened it, a tiny brass key clattered onto the table. The sound made me jump. I stared at the key. It was no bigger than a thumb, old-fashioned with a filigree bow and teeth worn smooth by decades of use. I pressed it into my palm and looked at the note. The paper smelled like dust and something earthy, old basements, forgotten boxes. The handwriting was my brother's. I would have known it anywhere. I forced myself to read, even as my skin prickled with goosebumps. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. There are things you never knew. The key opens what they tried to hide. Start in the attic. Tell Mom I forgive her, even if she never tells you the truth. Don't trust everything you remember. I read it twice, then a third time, my lips moving silently. I could hear the clock ticking above the sink and, outside, a distant car rolling by, tires hissing on wet pavement. I wanted to scream, to run, to call someone, my aunt, maybe, or even the police. But all I did was sit there, clutching that little key, heart racing. I called up the stairs. Mom, can you come down for a second? Her reply was muffled, but I heard her footsteps on the landing. She entered, drying her hands on a dish towel, eyes tired and wary. What's wrong? She asked, voice tight. I showed her the package, the note, the key. I watched her face, searching for any flicker of surprise or recognition. Instead, her mouth pressed into a thin line. Where did you get that? She said, her voice almost a whisper. It was on the porch. It's from him. It's his handwriting. Did you know he was going to send something? She shook her head, but her eyes darted to the key. No, I didn't know. There was a beat of silence. Rain tapped against the window, soft and steady. I tried to read her. Fear, guilt, relief? I couldn't tell. He says I should start in the attic, I said. Mom closed her eyes for a moment. The attic's just full of junk. Old furniture. Nothing up there. My frustration flared. He wouldn't say it if it wasn't important. He wanted me to find something. She looked at me, jaw clenched, then turned away. I just want you to be careful, she said, almost pleading. Some things are better left alone. I ignored her and grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. The metal was cold and heavy in my hand. The house felt smaller, the air dense. I could smell the faint tang of mildew as I climbed the stairs, the carpet runner rough under my bare feet. The attic door was stiff, and I had to shoulder it open. The hinges shrieked, echoing in the cramped hallway. I flicked the light. The bulb above me was weak and yellow, barely cutting the shadows. The floorboards groaned as I stepped into the attic, ducking under a low beam. Boxes were stacked in lopsided towers, covered in dust and old flowered sheets. I swept the flashlight in slow arcs, the beam catching on cracked trunks, a deflated beanbag chair, and a broken lamp. My breath stirred motes in the cold, still air. Start in the attic, I muttered. I tried every obvious place, a jewelry box, an old dresser, even the hollow inside a rolled-up rug. Nothing. I was about to give up when I noticed a battered steamer trunk wedged behind an armoire. The brass lock was tarnished, the surface scarred. I crouched, the wood floor biting into my knees, and fit the little key into the lock. It slid in easily, like it belonged there. I hesitated, the silence pressing in, then turned the key. The lock popped open with a soft click. Inside, there was just one thing, a small, locked wooden box, dark with age. I pulled it out, hands shaking, and inspected it. The key fit here, too. I turned it, and the lid creaked open. Inside was a journal, my brother's, by the look of the handwriting on the first page. The cover was battered, the leather cracked and peeling, but the pages inside were thick and crammed with writing. Tucked into the front cover was a Polaroid, my brother, maybe 17, standing in front of the house at dusk, his face half in shadow. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the journal. At first, it was what you'd expect from a teenager, gripes about school, scribbled song lyrics, notes about friends. But as I read deeper, the entries shifted. The lines grew hurried, the pen pressed harder. There were dates, times, hastily scrawled names. One entry caught my eye. Heard them fighting again. They think I'm asleep. Mom said, he can never know. It would destroy him. Dad just kept saying, it's not your decision anymore. I don't know what they're hiding, but I can't stay here. I kept reading, the words blurring as my eyes stung. My brother had written page after page about overheard conversations late at night, about strange phone calls my parents tried to hide, about money that appeared and disappeared without explanation. Downstairs, I heard my mother calling me. Her voice was sharp, anxious. What are you doing up there? Did you find anything? I didn't answer at first, torn between anger and fear. I heard her footsteps pounding up the stairs, then the attic door creaked. She stood in the doorway, eyes flashing. What did you find? She demanded. I held up the journal. Why didn't you ever tell me about any of this? He was scared. He thought you were hiding something. What happened? She pressed her lips together, hands twisting in her sleeves. You don't understand. It's not that simple. My voice cracked. He was my brother. You let him think he was alone. She shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. We were trying to protect you. Both of you. There are things you don't know, things that happened before you were born. Your brother, he never let it go. I stared at her, the weight of the journal heavy in my hands. The attic felt close and airless, the dust thick in my throat. I flipped to a marked page, a scrap of paper tucked between the leaves. On it, my brother had written. Found the letter in Dad's desk. Couldn't read all of it, but the words, affair, and paternity, were clear. I'm not who I thought I was. Mom's voice when she says my name, sometimes it sounds like a lie. The words hit me like a punch. My vision swam, my mother's face crumpled. Please, she whispered, don't. But I had to know. Is it true? Was he not Dad's son? She looked away, wiping her eyes. We tried to move on. We tried to give you both a normal life, but your father, he couldn't forgive me. Your brother found out and he couldn't handle it. Her words felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I looked back at the journal. The last entries were frantic, nearly illegible, the ink smeared. My brother wrote about feeling watched, about everyone lying to him, about wanting to disappear to find the truth for himself. He mentioned a name, someone I didn't recognize. There were notes about a phone call he'd overheard, about meeting someone who knew the real story. I sat hard on the attic floor, the wood cold even through my jeans. My mother knelt beside me, reaching for my hand, her palm warm and trembling. We loved him, she said. We love you. None of this was your fault. But I was barely listening. My mind was racing, piecing together every strange argument, every time my brother had looked at us like he was searching for answers we wouldn't give. The box, the key, the journal, the clues weren't just about my brother. They were about all of us. The secret had seeped into every part of our family, poisoning the trust between us. I closed the journal, heart pounding, and looked at my mother. What do we do now? I asked. She squeezed my hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. We tell the truth. We try to heal. That's all we can do. But I wasn't sure it would be enough. Not after everything that had been hidden, all the years lost to silence and suspicion. I stared at the attic window, rain streaking the glass, and wondered where my brother was now, or if he'd ever come home, knowing what he knew. Downstairs, the phone rang, shrill and insistent, slicing through the heavy silence. We both froze. Mom's grip tightened on my hand, her face tense. Do you think? I whispered. She shook her head, but her eyes were wide with hope and dread. Neither of us moved, both afraid of what might be waiting on the other end of that call. And even as the phone's ringing echoed through the house, I knew the story wasn't finished. The package had changed everything. But the real mystery, the truth about my brother, and what he'd discovered, was only just beginning. My hands were shaking when I slid the battered journal across the kitchen table to my mom. The morning sun glared through the window, painting streaks across the faded wood, but all I could focus on was her face, how the blood drained from her cheeks as she recognized my brother's handwriting on the cover. I said, I found this in the package. It's his. My voice was barely more than a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a bell. For a moment, she just stared. The clock on the wall ticked louder than I'd ever noticed, and the refrigerator hummed in the background. Then her fingers, trembling just like mine, reached out and brushed the worn edges. She didn't open it. Not yet. Do you know what's in here? I asked. It was a stupid question, the answer was obvious. But I needed to hear her say something, anything, that would make sense of the last 2 years. She looked at me, eyes wet but steady. I always suspected there was more he wasn't telling us, she said quietly. But I didn't want to push. I was scared of what I'd find out. I could see the weight in her posture, the way she hunched over as if trying to shield herself from a storm. I slid the journal closer. He wrote about Dad, about the night he left, about you, about me, about everything. She finally cracked the cover. The pages fluttered, the scent of old paper and something faintly metallic, blood, or just ink, drifted up. She started reading, lips moving silently, and I watched her relive every sharp word, every slammed door, every moment we'd pretended wasn't important. After a few pages, she closed her eyes. He always felt like he was the one who had to hold us together after your father left, she said. I think maybe I leaned on him too much. I didn't realize how much he was hurting. I wanted to scream, to ask why no one ever talked about it, but instead, I just pressed my palm to the cool table and listened. My mother ran a hand through her hair, her voice barely audible. He wrote me a letter once, after he left. I never showed you. I thought it would just make things worse. The air felt thick, like before a thunderstorm. I swallowed hard. We can't keep doing this. Keeping everything inside. Look where it got us. She nodded, tears finally breaking free. You're right. I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting you. I looked down at the journal, then back at her. He didn't want to be protected. He just wanted to be heard. We sat in silence, the kind that's heavy but somehow healing. My mother reached for my hand, squeezing it with surprising strength. Thank you for showing this to me, she said. I think it's time we talk about everything. No more secrets. That was the first time in years I felt like we could breathe again. The days after that conversation felt different, lighter, but raw. My mom and I sat together most evenings, reading a few pages from the journal at a time. Some entries were angry, almost desperate. Others were hopeful, filled with little drawings and lists of things my brother wanted to do when he came home. Once, I found a sketch of the four of us at the beach, my brother's blocky handwriting underneath. Maybe one day. Some nights, my mom would break down in tears. Other nights, she'd laugh unexpectedly at some memory he'd scribbled in the margins. We didn't talk about forgiveness, not directly, but it was there in the way we listened to each other, in the way we no longer tiptoed around his name. One evening, as cicadas buzzed outside and the kitchen smelled like burnt popcorn, my mom looked at me and asked, "Do you think he'll ever come back?" I hesitated. I don't know, but I think he wanted us to understand him, even if he couldn't say it face to face. She nodded, wiping her eyes. We owe him that much. There was a strange kind of peace in not knowing, at least not the whole story. For so long, I thought closure meant answers. Now I realized it just meant sharing the burden between us. I kept the journal on my nightstand, sometimes reading a page before bed. The package itself, a battered cardboard relic, sat on my dresser, still smelling faintly of rain and tobacco. I thought about sending a letter to the return address, but there was nothing but a string of numbers in a city I didn't recognize. Then, one afternoon, a text appeared on my phone from an unknown number. Just 3 words. You found it. I stared at the screen, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I typed back, fingers shaking, "Is this you?" No reply. The message hung there, a thread connecting me to something, or someone, out in the world. I showed my mom, and we sat together on the porch as the sun went down, silent but not afraid anymore. Maybe my brother was still out there, trying to find his own peace. Maybe he wasn't, but for the first time, I felt like our family could move forward, not by forgetting, but by remembering together. I decided to keep the journal close, its pages worn and honest. I didn't need to solve every mystery to start healing. Sometimes, finding the truth is just the beginning of learning how to live with it.